We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Welcome to the Executive Function for All podcast. Today we're sitting down with Zobel Bieber, a coach who specializes in helping high achievers with ADHD navigate their careers and the world. In this episode, we discuss imposter syndrome and why it hits so hard for people with ADHD. We also talk about the emotional weight that comes with managing executive function challenges and why building habits can feel nearly impossible for individuals with ADHD. Jen is one of my go-tos in discussing both ADHD and what it's like for high achievers in this world. I highly recommend her work and I'm excited to share her with you. Let's begin. Jen, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be here, Brandon. My pleasure.
Every time I talk to you, I learn so much and I'm just so grateful for the work you do. One of the cool things about the work that you do is that you do a lot of work with high achievers who have ADHD. And that's a pretty unique field, right? What are common observations that you see play out with ADHD and high achievers?
I think at the base of it, it's about, being a human being, right? All of us strive to achieve a certain amount of success in our career and also to be happy, to enjoy what we do. And I think in the case of high achievers who also have ADHD, it's been a real privilege to get to understand, their strengths, what they bring, and then equally so, what challenges them, right? So it's been a wild ride and a privilege to get to know these folks.
Here's one of my core things that I say, and I want to make sure this is true, right? But with ADHD, we have this thing called hyperfocus, right? Where when we find something we like, this interest-based nervous system, we are all in on it. And that's why we see a disproportionately high number of high achievers with ADHD. Is that true?
Yeah, I think hyperfocus is definitely what we would term a superpower, right? For sure. It also comes with its own challenges, right? It's a type of dysregulation on its own that serves people well when they can target it. I always say that one of the most important things when it comes to work specifically is that people choose work that interests them and gives them energy. So if we know that folks with ADHD tend to hyperfocus, we want to make sure that whatever they tend to hyperfocus on, is part and parcel of a day in the life of their work, right? That's the key. It's like if you meet folks who most of their work is drudgery to them, that would quickly do my clients in. But if the mainstay of their work is something that they would hyper focus on anyway, that's success right there because they'll enjoy it and they'll excel in it.
Yeah. What a gift, right? To have something that you would do for fun, to get paid for it. And so, we have this high proportion of people who can hyper focus. We see a lot of success there. What's the dark side to that?
I think it's, if you think of hyperfocus, almost like if you think of your attention as a flashlight, right? And you think about the challenges of ADHD being really the inconsistency of where that flashlight might fall. It's not always within my client's abilities to steady that flashlight. So where it falls is where it falls based on interest. If the flashlight falls on something they're not hoping to work on, then that's a real challenge because not only is it hard to then move that flashlight, but it's hard to even recognize sometimes that the flashlight's not where you want it to be. What I find, Brandon, is that clients know what's hard about hyperfocus. They know when it serves them, they know when it doesn't, but catching that in the moment isn't always possible or easy.
Yeah, I love the flashlight analogy too, because I can speak to that myself where everything else goes dark, right? Except for what I'm working on, right? And relationships get neglected or fitness gets neglected, right? So how do you help them steady that flashlight? Is that possible?
I think that kind of keys into those two areas of the brain where one of the you have two networks in the brain, right? We know of two networks in particular that have the most to do with that flashlight, with that focusing of attention, right? There's what is called the task positive network of the brain, which is the network we see light up in an fMRI machine if someone's given a task to do, solve a puzzle, right? Inside the machine, we'll see that task positive network light up. And then there's the default mode network of the brain. And that network is called default for a reason. It's our typical network that's lit when we don't have a task to focus on. And when we don't have a task, we tend to ruminate. We tend to perseverate on negative feelings. We tend to get stuck in the noise, the old narratives, the concerns, the anxieties. And so if you leave an individual in an fMRI machine and you don't give them a task to do, what you'll notice is that that default mode network is lit up. They are sitting inside that machine just thinking, what am I going to eat for dinner? Did I remember to pick up the milk? What's happening at my son's soccer game? But if you give them a task to do, then the task positive network will light up, right? And they will be focused on the task at hand. What's tricky about ADHD, and we have again seen this in fMRI studies, is that toggle switch between the DMN and the TPN networks is a bit wonky. So that when you give someone with ADHD in an fMRI machine a puzzle to do after you've had them sit there for a few minutes, that toggle switch, it's tougher for them to turn the default mode network toggle switch off and solely have that TPN network come on. And that interference, that noise, is what makes doing that puzzle hard. Now, if we take them out of the fMRI machine, that's the same thing that makes doing some parts of work hard. If my default mode network is loud, how am I going to easily switch to the task at hand, especially if that task asks a lot of me executive function wise, right? It's not a simple Sudoku puzzle. It's a project. It's a work project. So your question about how to help people make that switch with that wonkier toggle, there's no one answer across the board, right? But helping people to recognize these two distinct pathways, right? To recognize the difficulty of this and to have a felt sense metacognitively is part of the work I do.
That's really, really interesting.
Have you heard about those toggle switches before? Like, have you heard about those networks before?
Well, I know about the networks. I haven't heard about the way that you explained it. Yeah, that's one of the things it does. That I think it starts to give you with ADHD a lot of empathy for the experience, right? It takes it off of the character. So often we confuse executive function skills with character. And just to know it's a brain-based challenge, which we know it is, but the way you explained it, I thought was really helpful.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I think that that's actually, a great lead-in for us into this concept of the imposter syndrome, right? Because the imposter syndrome is a version of turning that moral diagnosis in on oneself, right? That's kind of what it is. And the way out of that tangle is through the neurobiological lens quite often, right? So clients might come to me expressing emotional pain. Like, I wish I were, fill in the blank, more able to budget my time, more able to plan ahead, more able to stick with this or that, more able to see this through. And they'll blame themselves. And we don't spend as much time in that emotional realm of blame. We spend much more time inside the neurobiological realm of helping them to understand how their brain works, how that emotional frustration, the starting point of that emotional frustration is not transparent. It's based in these essentially hidden neurobiological processes that are hard.
Yeah, that's when people hear that for the first time. Someone who's been beating themselves up their whole life. We know it's a really high correlation between ADHD and anxiety or perfectionism. But when people hear that for the first time, what type of reaction do you get?
I think that a sense of relief and a sense of curiosity starts to form. And I think the curiosity probably comes first, right? We'll be talking and we start to talk more granularly about what is really happening for them moment by moment. We don't talk about the time management, these broad terms, right? We talk about like, What's happening when you're setting up an appointment and you're not using your calendar to write that down? Like, what's happening in the moment? And when we start to look at the moments and we start to look at what's happening inside the brain at the moment, I think people get really curious. Like, they want to share. They start to see patterns. They start to make connections. We have these great conversations where they're seeing things for the first time in a completely different way. And it's through that curiosity and interest that they start to shed the shame, right? It sheds itself. We're not having, for the most part, the deepest of emotional conversations. We're having deeper neurobiological conversations. But the effect of those is a newfound sense of agency. I understand better how my brain works. I feel like I have more agency over how I spend my time, what I do, how I do it, when I do it. And that frees them up from anxiety and from shame. The imposter syndrome is human, right? It is ubiquitous. Folks who have a modicum of success, any amount of success in their careers, are also fearful. They tend to be fearful of the next set of expectations that come with that, right? And what I think is unique about the clients I see is that in terms of the imposter syndrome, they feel as though they can't always trust themselves. ADHD is really about having all the capability, but inconsistent performance.
Yeah.
And I think that is the genesis of anxiety that comes along with ADHD. And the imposter syndrome is a flavor of anxiety that comes along. I know I'm capable, but I also know I'm inconsistent. Will I be able to summon on demand the focus needed, right, to carry this out once again? Or did I hoodwink myself and the world, right, when I did it last time? So I guess, again, the imposter syndrome is human. This flavor of it is very particular to ADHD, that sense of my performance can be inconsistent.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I love how you took the big picture concept of like time management and just broke it down into like moment by moment, right? Because time management's a big confusing concept, especially when you don't understand time that well, having ADHD. So to break that down moment by moment, that's powerful. Like, can you play that out what that looks like? Is that like when you book a doctor's appointment and they're walking you through it, or how does that look?
In the context of let's take the doctor's appointment, one of the hardest things for some of the most successful folks to do is to make doctor's appointments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's really hard. I have in real time said to clients, okay, call the doctor and call me right back, right? Rather than take this on and we'll talk next week, because it's that hard sometimes. And why is it that hard? Sometimes they think it's because, I won't know what to say. I'll be presented with too many choices, scheduling wise. I won't know the answer I'm asked for, like, what's good for you? What would you like? You name it, there are concerns there, right? I'll be overwhelmed in the moment to be pleasant with the receptionist and to also think ahead linearly in time. 3 months from now, will Thursday afternoon or Thursday morning be better? I don't know. I'm going to screw this up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And short of outsourcing it, having someone else make the appointment for you, what do you do? Right. And why is it so tough? So I will sometimes ask clients, take me through it. Let's look at, for you, what's tricky. And I've had clients say to me, I'm not too concerned about the interaction, the phone, picking up the phone, talking with the receptionist, but I find that I get so concerned in the moment that I don't always write down the appointment. I'll just say yes. And, I'll write it on a piece of paper, but not in my calendar. I won't put it in my digital calendar because I'm talking on my phone and I can't do both things at once. So we stop there and we're like, wait a minute, this is working memory. You're being asked to hold on to a piece of information, record that information, stay social in the moment, probably field other questions from the receptionist, like, is your insurance still the same? Are you still at the same address? Meanwhile, if you haven't written down the appointment, it's gone. And then there's the concern of, should I ask? Do I have it right? Thank goodness in the modern era, most of us get text messages confirming the appointment day and time now. But, with my clients, just practicing the simplest thing of the saying, can you bear with me while I jot this down, while I make sure I put this in my calendar? Practicing saying that over and over again in every context, whether it's lunch with a friend, it's a doctor's appointment, it's a meeting, saying to whoever you're in front of, can you bear with me? I actually have to put this in my calendar or I won't, is a skill, self-advocating that way.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for breaking that down because you did a beautiful job. It sounds so simple, like making an appointment. And you broke down all the steps and all that's going on. And it does get overwhelmed very quickly just hearing about it. You've seen many folks with ADHD. How do they manage the challenge of all the heavy executive function lifting they have to do in their job, which probably has a lot of expectations, with this anxiety and imposter syndrome you're speaking to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one answer. I think that each individual manages differently. So funny. I came up with these questions and yet they're too broad, right?
You're good. Take your time.
Yeah. I think this one really comes down to signal and noise, right? So one of the things we know, and I'll say it scientifically, right, is that the ADHD brain is a noisy brain. It's fast. It's not organized in a linear fashion, right? There's a lot going on and it's noisy. And so finding the signal through the noise is a key piece of managing, right? So one type of noise is that imposter syndrome noise. That's the emotional noise. That's the second guessing, the shame, the anxiety around inconsistency. Learning to quiet that noise is key. And it's not easy. In fact, the best way we know of to quiet that noise is for the signal to be so compelling, for the work at hand to grab one's interest so much that that toggle switch is sharp, it comes on, and the noise is eclipsed, right? And my client is then able to focus on signal. Sometimes clients come to a session and they want to share all the noise in their heads just to get to the signal. Hey, Jen, I have this report to write for work, right? And I have all these concerns. And I have concerns about the report itself. I have concerns about my boss. I have concerns about coworkers, all these pieces, right? And if I can help them learn to quiet all the noise around that and to key into the signal pieces, right? The signal being there's something that lacks, you don't have clarity around this report. And the way to gain that clarity is not to parse through all the noise. It's actually to acknowledge that there is noise and to kind of then set it aside and really look for that signal. Sometimes it's what most interests you in this work, right? Sometimes it is that, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just a report you have to write. And so what is the signal then, right? And then the signal is, well, let's gain some clarity. There's some things that are ambiguous here. Maybe you're not sure what the first step is. Maybe you have to have 2 or 3 different conversations before you can even sit down. Maybe you have to grab 3 or 4 different digital files, right? And so if I can help a client identify the actions, I'm helping them identify signal. I'm keeping the noise at bay. I'm helping them to gain clarity so that they can take action. And what's beautiful is that acronym CAM. It's an acronym I share often. CAM is CAM, and it stands for clarity, leads to action, leads to motivation.
I love that.
If I can help a client gain clarity, they can then take action. And action is what really makes us feel motivated. Oftentimes clients come and they want to feel motivated. Human beings want motivation to come first. We all do. Of course we do. Because when we're motivated, we feel great. We feel like we have energy. We feel we can do anything. But motivation rarely comes first. And, sometimes action comes before clarity. Sometimes when a client's stuck and we can't get clear, we need them to take an action first. But oftentimes we'll start with what needs to get clearer. We identify it. We identify the action to take. And then the motivation comes.
Yeah, that's really good. One of the most common questions I receive from parents is, how can I motivate my son? How can I motivate my daughter? Like they lack motivation. And bringing it back to, I mean, we all want to do well, right? So how do we give them clarity? I really like that Cam piece. Another common question I receive is because we know a lot of the stuff you're speaking to, routines can be helpful, right? So habits and routines. So why is it so hard for people with ADHD to form habits or routines?
Yeah, I love this question because invariably so many clients will say to me, if only I had a routine for it, I could do it more consistently, whatever it is. And Brandon, your work, I mean, you guys do a lot of work with clients around routine. And routine is fantastic. It really is a key piece of the puzzle, right? But you and I both know it's fragile. We wish it weren't so, but clients will say things like, I wasn't feeling so well. I got up later than usual. I traveled for work. Any of these things can throw us off, right? And I think through the years, I've realized that working at the highest levels around routine masks the difficulty that's there, right? So if we just say, well, make sure you pack up your bag in advance for the morning so that you make it to the gym and you have this other bag and you make it to the office. And that's all well and good. But embedded in that is a lot of heavy executive function lifting. And you and I have spoken about this. I like to make the analogy with dyslexia. Bear with me. But if we know that dyslexics can read, they read slower. That's why a lot of adult dyslexics don't know they're dyslexic. They just feel they're slow readers, right? They read slower because reading doesn't come fluently and automatically. It's a heavy lift to decode each time. And I think that what we're going to discover and what we're discovering is that the analogy with ADHD is that if we substitute routine for reading, right? We look at routines. Routines are made up of lots of executive function components, and those components are not fluid or automatic for my clients, not in the way that they are for folks who take them for granted that don't have ADHD. And so routines don't, it's almost like muscle, we talk about muscle memory. My clients don't have the same type of deep muscle memory for their routines. And so each time they do them, it takes focus and concentration. And that's a catch-22. That's hard.
Yeah. How do you override that? Or do you override that?
I think that that's a really good question. And I would say that's almost like the lifeblood of my work. I'm going to break the fourth wall or whatever it's called for a minute. But it's such a good question. The classic ways that we think about this often don't work for my clients, right? Like sticky notes become wallpaper. Methods that work for one person don't work for another. I can give an example
Please.
of one that I think has worked, and it comes from actually from the sports world, packing one's hockey gear, if I can borrow a personal one. So I often say to clients, when you're trying to make sure you have everything, right, that you're bringing everything with you, which is a type of routine, right? Packing up, being ready. Sometimes it helps to know the number of items, not the names of the items, because names of items are heavy to carry around. But numbers are this like they're easier for folks. So if I know that I always take 5 things with me to the office, being able to quickly count up that I have 5 rather than have I taken the keys? Have I taken the wallet? Have I taken the phone? I just quickly go through. Do I have my 5 things? Yep, got my 5 things ready to go, right? That can be really helpful. It's like a shortcut. Doesn't work for everybody though. Doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, it feels like so much of this goes back to the metacognition or metacognitive work you were talking about before. It's to steal a line from Bill Dotson in the ADHD world. He talks about the ADHD owner's manual, right? It's like every person needs to try to, it just comes back to so many questions about what works for your brain and documenting and writing that somewhere. And you have this owner's manual after a little bit that you can refer back to because your brain is just built so differently.
Yes. And the other thing I would add to that what I love about Dodson's work in that owner's manual is he always says, some things work for a little while and then they stop working. So make sure you have a robust owner's manual. And I think that's so spot on because when we think about novelty and how important new and novel things are to the ADHD brain in particular, it's striking, right? And many times when my clients let routine go, it's because it's become boring. It's not new anymore. And I always say it the same way, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Whatever we figured out that works, let's hold on to it, but let's make something about it novel.
I love
right?
that. Yeah, I love that.
Right? Let's make something about it. So if a client of mine once said to me, you know what works for making sure I have my notebook ready for our coaching calls? The notebook has to be like really funky, like, jazzy color or something. And, for a while, her hot pink notebook was working. But when it stopped being novel, she had to switch it up to something more interesting. But the idea of the notebook, of having a notebook ready, that's the routine. We're not going to touch that. We're not going to change that. We're just going to make one piece of it, the cover of that notebook, novel, new, so that what works doesn't get stale.
Yeah, well, and even the simple basic understanding that you need to add some novelty. I just don't think that's an understanding that a lot of people with ADHD have. And then they beat themselves up when they let a routine go awry.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that component, and it's Dodson's, right? Dodson's acronym,
Yeah.
INCUP, right? Interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, passion. What drives the ADHD brain? These 5 pieces drive that brain. And so making sure that what systems you set up, if you're going to set up systems for yourself, making sure that there's interest there, there's enough novelty, which requires certain change, that you feel challenged, but in a good way, the way your brain likes to be challenged, right? And urgency is almost always very helpful for my clients. So oftentimes this is always funny. Clients will say to me, I want to get up earlier and use the time better in the morning before work. And that's great. More power to you. But if urgency is your friend, and it's easier for you to leave the house with what you need in 5 minutes in a rush than it is taking 35 minutes, we're going to work inside the time frame of 5. We're just going to make sure you get everything you need accomplished in those 5 and go with that, right? Utilize that urgency.
So, Jen, to close it up, what advice would you give to high achievers who also have ADHD?
I would say, Brandon, that it really comes down to making certain that we choose what gives us energy, that we place our focus there, that we find the signal through the noise. We ask that question of, how can I gain clarity here? And that we start to view ourselves less from an emotional standpoint and more from a neurobiological one. What's at play here?
Yeah, those are great ones. And those are great starting points on the process as well. Jen, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
I invite people to find out more about me and the work that I do and my colleagues do at the Hallowell Center. Our website is drhallowell.com, and there's lots of great resources on the site and more about coaching and more about the work I do.
Awesome. Jen, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Brandon. This was fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.